Can you clarify something you said yesterday about possibly some of Senate Bill 5 being in the budget?
Yeah, look, my intention was to look at part of the provisions that get schools developing criteria for teachers. But, I was thinking this morning, reflecting on the question, I can't tell you everything the legislature is going to do. So, we'll see what that process is, Joe. I mean, when I was asked about it, my off-the-cuff reaction was, look, I think this criteria of being able to establish performance criteria is something that I'd like to see in there. But we'll see how it all works out.
Is that criteria done? Because you talked about it a little bit last week.
Well, it's sort of 50%. I don't think it's all done yet. It's like 50% based on the ability of kids to complete an entire year, and the other 50% are teachers, principals, parents, and their peers. So no, I don't think it's all done yet, but I think it gives them direction. And this doesn't happen next year. This is a process, and I think it's a good process, but it's not going to just happen out of the blue next year. It's something that will be developed and perfected over time.
Governor, the Democrats are trying to push through some legislation that would allow for recall in Ohio, and they say you're the target. What's your reaction to that?
Oh, I mean, look, there's a lot of politics going on, and when you take a look, my whole purpose is to fix this state, and when you take a look at what we did over the period of the last 90 days, it's pretty remarkable. Lots of changes, from Jobs Ohio to the Common Sense Initiative to public-private partnerships, closing an $8 billion structural deficit. Look, that's where my focus is. I don't pay a lot of attention to the other political things that go on, and we got to spend our time trying to figure out how to get the state on the right track.
Would you have been less likely to do something like Senate Bill 5 if you had
a recall? No, I mean, look, again, I told you, I don't. This is all designed. Look, Senate Bill 5 was designed to give local governments the ability to cope with fewer resources, and the ability for taxpayers to be at the table. So, okay. Anything else?
Do you think there should be elements of Senate Bill 5 put into the budget because of the looming referendum?
No, you know what? I don't want to get into what I want to do, what I don't want to do, because then I might have to retract. But look, I think Senate Bill 5 passed. There's going to obviously be a referendum. The House and the Senate has to work its way, and even when Senate Bill 5 was moving through, I had my opinion on them. I kept it to myself, and I think that's the best way for me to behave. I've submitted my budget. There will be some language on the teacher assessment, but outside of that, we'll see what the legislature wants. I meet with them all the time. I talk to them all the time. But anything else I say, I don't want to have to come back and say, well, I rethought this or that. That's all I can tell you at this point. Okay?
Do you get your picks for the Masters yet?
I haven't. Well, today is Wednesday. I'm sticking with the fact that it'll be somebody that hits it at least 300 yards. So I think if I were to pick, I would say that Dustin Johnson's not a bad thought. But I'll narrow this down a little bit more. I'll hope to come up with 3 or 4. I don't have time to really do this, but I didn't pick. Look, I picked VCU and Butler in the Final Four. No, I didn't. But I told you the problem with Ohio State was if they didn't, they were vulnerable, and it was the outside shooting. Look, I thought the best player on the team was Buford, and when Buford doesn't play well, the scores are either close or they lose. He had a bad game. But what's interesting? You have Kansas that I think went 35-3. And you had Ohio State that was about the same, 35-3 or 4. There's something about a tournament where they score less than 20 points in the first half. You wonder about how the system's run. So I don't think we're going to change it. This was the most unusual March Madness. Everybody was interested, and it was pretty cool. But when you're 9-9 in your conference, it ought not to count for much against a team that's like 35-2. You know what I'm saying? But I'll leave that to the experts. I've got economies to fix here and jobs to bring to the state.
Governor, what do you think of the federal budget?
Well, I mean, Ryan is. I haven't really seen all the details. Ryan was actually an aide when I was the chairman. He sent me copies of things. But look, the time has come to deal with a $13 trillion deficit, and it's our children that are ultimately at risk. I mean, how do you finance these things, and how this affects the economy? George Shultz wrote a good piece yesterday that I saw briefly, I give Ryan a lot of credit for moving forward. And I believe there's a lot of reform in these budgets. I'm a lot bigger reformer than I am anything else, and I think reform leads to the kind of changes that you can really embrace, and that's what our budget's a lot about. Our budget is an awful lot about reform. That's why a lot of you have had so much difficulty trying to figure out how it all works. But anyway, I got to go.
Do you like the Medicaid block grant?